Good afternoon to you all, and welcome. It's wonderful to have our leaders and elders here, and welcome to the Silent Peace Walk for respect for all people, for Muslims and Jews and Christians and Buddhists and atheists and worms and eagles and deer and beings everywhere. If we've not met before, my name is Kornfield, and I was trained as a Buddhist monk for many years in monasteries and been fortunate also to be part of peace work in various parts of the world. And I'm enormously grateful to see you all and to be able to share this silent peace walk together. Thank you also, Shubha, for that gorgeous music, that heart-opening Sufi music, and for bringing your friends to sing with us. When I lived in Thailand, starting in the 1960s for quite a long time, there was a period where there was a great conflict between the military dictatorship at that time and a student-led revolution to try and get democracy and oust the military dictatorship. And at several points, for periods of months or a year, there were barricades on the streets, army versus the students fighting, and a number of people were killed. And when it came to one of the worst times in the 1970s, where there had been, the conflict had built up to its peak in some way, and there had been a lot of killing, and people were really frightened of what was going to happen in the country or civil war. One of the abbots of a forest monastery outside of Bangkok got all the monks and nuns of his followers together, some 100 or more, to take their robes and their alms bowl and walk barefoot into Bangkok, starting very early in the morning, and get there and walk until they came between the lines of the barricades of the students and the military with their guns. And they simply stood there in the sun, in the hot sun, all morning for several hours, embodying the peace that people so much wanted in the country. They not only stopped the fighting, but after that, it's as if the conflict had peaked, and people regained a bit of their sanity and realized that we don't have to be shooting at one another in this way. And their simple act was done in silence, and was done simply standing there in the middle of the battle and saying there is another way. And so you join in this tradition for this afternoon, and I'm so pleased that we all get to be part of it together. This particular peace walk started through my dear friend Stephen Folder, who's sitting here, who's led many of these yatras or peace walks for years in Israel and Palestine, and I had the privilege of being a part of a couple of these walks. And from our dear friend Mahago Sananda, who is the Gandhi of Cambodia, and walked through the war zones of Cambodia, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a number of times. Scholar of 15 languages. He spent a lot of his last years walking on foot, leading people back to their villages, chanting the chants of loving kindness and forgiveness, so that every step they could reclaim their broken country with their hearts. So it's in that spirit that you all gather together. And these are perilous times. They're perilous times for many parts of the Middle East and the world, India, Pakistan, Syria, Israel, Palestine. We could go on, but also here in this country, and the kind of insecurity that gets fanned, especially in political times, and ignorance in which we then demonize, whether it's the communists or the immigrants or now the Muslims, kind of the enemy du jour. And yet in the midst of this demonization, there are also people who stand up and say no. And people who stand up and say, I offer myself as a witness for peace. So Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh said, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. even one person on the boat remained centered and calm, it was enough. It showed the way for all the others on that boat to survive. And in that way, you are that person in the world that forgets its way, that's ignorant and frightened and in pain and so forth. You become that one person on the boat of the world, as do the leaders that we join together with. And so in community, we get to stand up for peace, to walk for those who can't walk, where it's too dangerous. And there was a parallel peace walk in Bethlehem that was supposed to happen. And then what occurred there was that some of the young activists there said, we can't let even the Israeli peacemakers come because they're from the occupying country, and they represent the enemy in some way. And they posted the pictures on the Facebook website. These are the people, collaborating with the enemy. And the response from our friends, the peacemakers in Bethlehem, it was not to hide or to run away, but say, oh, these are the people we want to talk to. What are your names? Can we go out and meet you? Oh, and bring your mothers, by the way, so we have a real conversation. Really went down to it. So we walk for those who long for peace. You walk as part of a long line of history of those who stood up in every age and renew it time after time after time, because it has to be renewed in the same way that our breath renews our life. We're joined by a wonderful group of leaders here who I will name, and hopefully I won't leave out. But I'm not going to name them necessarily. Let's see. Okay, on your far right is Shabda Khan, who is a peer in the Sufi order and a beautiful musician in the Sufi Rubaiyat order, and then Sheikh Al-Fariha, who is part of the Al-Jarahi Dervish order, and then also Sheikh Goforth, part of that Sufi order, and then Robert Chase, who is, what is your organization?
Intersections International.
Reverend Robert Chase, Intersections International, which is a peace building organization here in New York City. Jonathan Granoff, who's been working for global peace and whose organization is Global Security International, but he is also a teacher in the lineage of Baba Moyadeen, Philadelphia. Jessica Dibb, of Inspiration, is her organization in Baltimore. Then Sawa Kader, who's part of the U.S. Federation for Middle East Peace, is that correct? Thank you for being here. Stephen Folder, my good friend. Rabbi David Ingber, who is part of Rome. What is the name? The Jewish Spiritual Center. Roman. Jewish Spiritual Center. Roman, on the west side, where it should be. Tamam Khan, who is also involved with both the Sufi tradition for many years and the tradition of the sacred feminine. Then Lucinda Antrim, who is representing the Quakers, the Friends Society of New York, with a long and magnificent history of peace work. They on the back row, you wouldn't please stand, because they can't see you. You have to stand behind these guys for a second. And then Pierre who is in the lineage of Pierre Zia Khan, who's in the lineage of Hazrat Inayat Khan and of that Sufi lineage that's come to the West starting several generations ago, and lives in New Lebanon, New York, and came down with his family to be part of the leadership of this walk. So thank you all for being here, and for more than that, for the part of the is we walk together as a community. Whatever your background, whatever your religious or lack of religious orientation, whatever your gender, whatever your ability, whatever your class, whatever your ethnic background, we welcome you. You are part of our family. And peace welcomes you. And we want to show what's possible in New York, because New York already does it. The Christians and Muslims and Jews and atheists and everybody else, they all ride the subway together. So this is the model that we want the world to see. And we will walk together with friendliness and goodwill, with a quiet presence and dignity, with a certain courage. And we will also will be walking up Fifth Avenue across the northern part of the park and down. It turns out, this is a little aside, that we will not be walking on the park side. There's been some conflict between the police and the park department about the department said, no, this is our sidewalk and we issue permits. You can't walk on our side of the street, you have to walk on the other side of the street. You know how it goes in this world. So we said, all right, we'll walk wherever you tell us. It's all right. We're peaceful, we're not going to get into conflict with you about it. May you be happy. So the last thing I want to say is that I have some flowers here because Gal Romano, where are you, Gal? She in here? Oh, there you are. She's the person who spent the last year, yes, she's doing postdoc work at Columbia and so forth, but she really spent the last year organizing this, and even though it seems very simple to walk for peace, it was a huge undertaking, a lot more complicated than she imagined. She now thinks it's her second career, or maybe her first, and I just want to offer these to you.